Hello guys, and welcome back to Artvent. Today is day 4, so we're opening the 4th door. Let's see what's inside. And today we have watercolor with me, and basically like a penguin. So I thought, I'd love to watercolor animals in particular, but also like sketch. And I tried to think of some way to make it more like Christmasy, if you know what I mean. And so I thought, I guess so, kind of like a penguin is, I guess, sort of like Christmassy because North Pole, South Pole, or whatever, like living in a colder climate. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. As you can tell, I'm basically doing the base with the watercolor. One thing that I thought would be interesting, to talk about here is I haven't been watercoloring for quite a long time. It actually all started when I did like a course. I think it was like just the beginning of summer, like this year, like I think like around June or whatever. And it was basically like a 2-day course. And yeah, basically, I remember our teacher telling us that, in English, you just have one term for one particular, you just have watercolor, but it's not like specific because there's like watercolor like you have in school, like those paints. And then there's watercolor like this, which is not the same thing. And I found that really interesting because we call it, like this particular style is called aquarelle. Aquarelle, like I don't know how to pronounce it, but it doesn't really exist in English. You just have the term watercolor, which actually stands for a lot of different things and techniques and stuff like that, because basically like anything that is color and water is watercolor, so that's kind of interesting. And basically in this course I learned all of like the basics and the techniques you're supposed to use. So for example, using a lot of water and basically building up from the lightest colors to the darkest ones, which, considering I'm making a penguin who includes like some white, you can already tell that I forgot one big step right here, because I painted the entire background a light shade of green and forgot to leave space, like leave some white space for the penguin, for the shades of white the penguin. And yeah, that was very unfortunate, so keep that in mind. And basically I remember we were told like there is no such thing as black or necessarily white in watercolor, because watercolor has to supposedly have like this see-through sort of look to it, and that you can always see some of the paper, and with black you would completely cover it. And also with white, if you were to take actual white paint, like there's no such thing as white paint. It's almost like it always has sort of like a coverage factor, like white always covers up, and so it technically doesn't work with watercolor. And yeah, you can see me doing the background right here. Again, you always start with the light shades and then go darker and darker. And one thing that's interesting about the brushes that you use is basically that they are very absorbent, like they take up a lot of moisture, I guess, like a lot of water. So they're not just like regular brushes. These weren't like super expensive, but they also weren't like super cheap, because normally I tend to go for like really cheap paints and materials and whatnot. But when it comes to brushes, I'm a little different, because again, I'm very traumatized by having little hairs stuck to my canvas because they fell out of the brush. So yeah, here you can see me going in with a bright orangey yellow color for the penguin. And I don't know if I want to reveal that already, but this is not my favorite watercolor painting I have done so far. And maybe I'll do a video one day where I'm just gonna review. I think I'm definitely gonna do a video like that, basically where I review all of the art I've done, so basically my art collection, all of the things, all the paintings. And I have quite a lot of watercolor paintings, and there are so many here which I find to be way better than this one. And I think it's again just proving like you need to be patient, because I think I was so impatient with, you know, waiting for the, you know, the paints to dry, because whilst on one hand, you know, you kind of want it all to be like a little wet, because then it creates these nice, I think they're called like flowers, like when the colors run into each other, and sometimes you do want that. But in my case, especially with the black, I think it kind of escalated, and I'm just not a big fan of it. There are way better ones, and it came to the point where I literally thought about whether or not I should even upload this video or just paint a different animal, or start from scratch, because I really didn't like it. And I don't know, you know, maybe some of you are going to be like, what are you talking about? This is insane. Maybe it's just, you know, the typical like artist thing, you know you have done better, so you're very self-critical. And yeah, I guess also realism, like here you can already tell, like this is when my anger started, because the orange color just runs everywhere, like the orangey yellow runs into the background, because I didn't wait. I was impatient. Yeah, but you know, I guess I will never learn. And here you can see, for example, you know, like a penguin tends to be like black, but I'm starting off consciously with the gray color, because unlike with acrylic paints, which, you know, if I want to do highlights or, you know, use white, I simply wait for the colors to dry, which happens to be like very quickly, and then you just take white paint and paint over it, or take lighter colors, because, you know, they sort of like can cover up each other, which with watercolors is not quite the same. It's not to the same degree. You know, you can't basically, for example, I can't go over white watercolor with this. It's not going to do anything. What you can do, which you can see I did here, is with like a sponge, or even with a brush, like if you remove like all of the water from your paintbrush, you can kind of like rub over the paper and absorb some of the color and water a little bit. So it's almost like erasing with an eraser when you do like sketching. So it's kind of fun. I remember that was a technique that we were taught. And yeah, I remember it was actually really, really fun. And it's just a very different medium for me, especially because I'm so used to, you know, building up layers. Ouch. That is painful. You see that right there, you know. Trying to, you know, minimize damage because I just spilled or something like that, you know. But yeah, basically I'm more used to painting with acrylics, and so this was a very new experience, but I also really enjoyed it. But there were moments where I guess sort of like my acrylic painter self came back in, where I was like, I want to use colors that you normally wouldn't use in watercolor, and techniques, or I would again simply forget to leave out certain space, or also this sort of like perfectionism, because I truly believe like there's a point where you just need to stop, where you just need to like, you know, it's not gonna get better than this, because I feel like oftentimes, especially as an artist, but even like in my school career, I feel like, you know, you start to question yourself or criticize yourself, and then you go, I could do it like this, and then you ruin it. And that's, I think, something that happens a lot with me and watercolor, where I just didn't stop. And I remember in the course that I did, like the watercolor course, I basically ended up with like 2 paintings, both very different, and it's ironic. The one that ended up taking less time actually has more, I feel like, character to it, or more fits more with the watercolor aesthetic, or I don't know what you want to call it, basically style, like what watercolor is supposed to be, you know, light and airy and, you know, still vibrant, but, you know, not, for example, like acrylics, right, who are very like bold. And you know, can literally tell the first picture, which was like two kois, I think, like a koi pond sort of situation, and I did so many layers and so many like details, and it still looks great and beautiful, but it doesn't have the same character as the other one, which took way less time. It's basically like 2 swimming tigers, and it's not even like properly finished, but I just started really quickly, just a few like brush strokes, and it just looks so nice. And I remember I was so confused. I'm like, why does it look so good if I barely have done anything? And I remember the instructor of the course, you know, the watercolor course, basically explained, you know, that sometimes the beauty of it, you know, you just go with the flow, you know, you're not as critical and perfectionist. And I think that's sometimes what I tend to forget. It's ironic that you have these moments where it just clicks, it just works, you know, you just do a few little things, you don't put in a lot of effort, and it just works. I guess maybe it's like the flow or whatever, you know, we learned that in university, you know, sort of the flow experience, you know, where it's the perfect balance between being challenged and, you know, also being motivated and things like that. So yeah, again, you can tell how the colors run into each other, especially like in the beak of the penguin, and that just made me so upset, because I'm like, oh, you know, crisp lines, which I guess is also not the typical character of watercolor. It's not supposed to be like crispy, perfectly done black outlines, you know, that are perfectly straight. Like, for example, when I did like the digital art yesterday, well, I didn't do it, well, yeah, on day 3 of Artvent, you know, like the digital art thing there, you know, technically you could emulate watercolor, but, you know, for a certain style, like for example for cartoons, you need like those crisp lines, but for watercolor it kind of takes away, and I think that's what I forgot. And also the fact that penguins, you know, there is a lot of black, and you're not supposed to use black when it comes to watercolor, so I was a little concerned about that. Maybe I should have gone for an iceberg, but then it's like, it's just white, so I thought it would be very basic. I think I should have gone like with a deer or something, like a reindeer. I think that would have been a nice idea, but you know what, I'm sharing this anyway for all of the people, because I'm definitely not alone in this, that, you know, you just have these days where it is just not your best work, and it doesn't work out, and it makes you upset, and then, you know, because you're upset, you just make it worse, you know, and you kind of lose the motivation and calm and passion, and then it just gets worse and worse. And I think something that I also realized, like, you never tend to show the pieces of art that you don't like. I feel, you know, I feel like that's the case, especially for me. Like, I remember I would even throw away some of the artworks that I didn't like, or I was like, I just started it, it's not even finished, or I just thought it was ugly and I just threw it away or hid it. And, you know, you would never post, like, for example, a failed artwork and be like, you know, show it off, because why would you do that, right? And so I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna post it anyway for transparency, because this is reality. There are simply some works that are better than others. You know, there are days where you're just in a flow and it all works out for you, and then there are days where you're like, why is it the ugliest painting I've done in a long time, right? And you're just not proud of it. But I thought, you know, I'd still share it, because I feel like a lot of time when I look at these videos of like my art journey, or you know, basically like reviewing, you know, old art or looking at all my art, it's rarely, maybe I'm incorrect, but it feels like it's rarely like unfinished things or like ugly sort of like, sure, of course, in the you know, drawing journey thing or whatever, you of course see improvement, but it would never be like something that is half finished, for example. You know, you do sort of like choose, of course, you know, you're not going to show up everything, because for example, for me, if I would actually possess all of the art I've ever did, considering that I also had like a little bit of a break between, like, in high school, like I didn't draw at all basically besides in school, like if you put all of these things together, it's so much, so you're obviously not going to show off everything, so of course you're going to pick, which already puts this question in your head, like, well, what is not shown? And so I thought, you know what, even though I'm not proud of it, I'm simply gonna show it to you guys, so maybe you can, you know, sort of relate to this problem where, you know, sometimes it just doesn't work out and it feels like, you know, your level went back like a few years, like you feel like you go from, oh, you know, I'm really good at painting, right, and then you feel like you're like a toddler all over again, which is frustrating, but I'm like, it's fine, even though even now when I'm looking at this penguin, I'm like, this is horrible, but it's fine, it's for you guys, you know, you are not alone. And, you know, I think maybe we should start a trend where like people post the drawings that they hate, that they find ugly. Yeah, maybe that should be, you know, a new trend, to, like, showing off my discarded art, showing off like the black sheep of my art collection. Maybe I'm gonna do something like that, where it's literally just about all of the art pieces that I hate or find cringe or anything like that. I'm like, here you go. The highs and lows, because they really do exist with basically everything, so obviously also with art. You know, because I think in our heads, or at least in my head, it's like this imagination of, you know, you have linear progression, you know, it just goes upwards, or like a curve. But it's not necessarily like that, you know, it can happen that you just, you know, sometimes you have something like this, and then other times, you know, have a really beautiful watercolor painting that barely took you any time or effort, and it's like, it just happens. I can't explain it, but it just happens. Very fun. Yeah, you can see here I'm still trying to save what can't be saved. And you can tell, like, normally I would put, like, I guess a little bit more effort and love into it, but here the love is already gone. I'm already so disappointed, and this already, you know, that didn't make it much better, you know, the black just flowing everywhere. And I truly now understand why our instructor in the watercolor course said, you know, you don't use black in watercolor, because it's really, like, it's just not great. But yeah, you know, it's all a part of the journey, a part of the learning. I still find it really fun, though, and honestly, I'm quite surprised, because I only started in June, and almost all of my paper, like from this stack of watercolor papers, which, you know, are like kind of like stuck, like glued together, so, you know, because of all the water, you know, the paper would sort of like lose its shape and do whatever it wants and bends and whatnot. And I've done so many watercolor paintings. When I look back on it, it's mostly like nature or like animals. I don't know what it is about me and animals. Maybe it's, you know, my childhood self, because I used to be like a huge animal nerd when I was a child. I was like, I want to be like a zoologist, I want to work in a zoo. Or also, you know, like those people in BBC, you know, that film the documentaries on our nature. There's still like this little piece inside of me, which is like, I would just love to be like in the wild and have like literally, like, for example, a penguin right in my face or something like that. I just love animals still. And yeah, here you can see me actually putting a little bit more effort to make the background a little bit more bright and like vibrant, or like, you know, have a little bit more dimension, but it's, you can tell like deep inside this painting has died, is dead to me. But now it will never die because it's on the internet. So I hope you enjoyed this, and you know, after those finishing touches of green, trying to save myself, all I can say is I hope you enjoyed today's video, and until tomorrow, and yeah, goodbye.